Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Archetypal Radio. I'm Michael Ebbinghaus. So I've been reading this book over the last couple of days. It's really churning a lot of ideas in my mind that I've been thinking about for a while, namely this concept that I've had for a different kind of education system, or a different type of university, if you will. I've since referred to it as the Mystery School, simply because, one, I believe exploring the mystery is what we're here to do. I believe it is very mysterious, and I'm very thankful for that. I think we should all be, that it is so mysterious that we continually get to discover it and find it out. B, that I don't really know exactly what it'll look like, because, and this is the core of it, is that this kind of a university system, while it would necessarily include systems of thought and philosophy and psychology and economics and all manner of science and exploration, whatever exploration the individual wants to take, because undoubtedly there are others that want to undertake that. But it would have a special emphasis on the individual exploring themselves, him or herself, themselves. And this is what's really missing from our school system today, our public school system, our universities. We've really lost this in our universities, unfortunately, and we all pay a dear price for it. That's one of the things that I'm really trying to communicate with this broadcast, with my writing, with the people I talk to, with my clients, and is that you have to be able to explore yourself, and you need to explore yourself. Otherwise, how could you ever know? There's so much of you that is comprised by things that you are not aware of or conscious of, and broadening that awareness is the first step to really integrating with the world and integrating with spirit. And that's going very quickly. I'm not going to try and explain the entire ladder or hierarchy of that, but every individual person comes into this experience, comes into this world, into this reality with certain things that are intrinsic to them and only to them. Now, there's certainly different types of people, different groups of people that you can kind of correlate together, but each person has a specific role that they cannot be reduced to. It is of themselves. And just as the trees that I'm looking at right now, there's never been a tree that's existed quite like that. There's not another human being that has existed quite like you. And to be able to explore that, to be able to recognize that there's not a mechanistic set of laws that govern who you are and how you operate, or even how this universe operates. This is but one plane that we can travel in, and it's more predictable, but it's so that there can be an experience at all. And what I really want to try and communicate is that it is actually possible to begin to do this. And to some extent, I believe that this is already happening. It takes a large movement, and it takes a lot of time and being able to take where we are currently and transform it into something else rather than blasting it apart. And there's really good reasons for not doing that, namely that we'll be able to carry this enormous seed of human potential with us. And by that, I mean the things that have worked for us so far, the value systems, the idea systems that have worked for us really well so far, and the potential and beauty and uniqueness and soul and talents and gifts and detriments and flailings of each and every person. That's how this reality changes into something that can be more described as heaven. This idea that we've contemplated for centuries, for millennium, for eons. And the book that I've been reading is this one here, is The Farther Reaches of Human Nature by Abraham Maslow. You might know him from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, of basic safety, shelter, food, relationship, connection, self-actualization, up that ladder. And he was very concerned, not concerned in a sense of worried, but concerned as in fascinated in what to do with the problem of modernity, and to what to do with the problem of where are we all headed, what are we going to do about it, what works, and what makes it to where we can flourish, not just as tribes and families and subcultures and nations, but as an entire global community. He was someone that was very attuned to the social problems of his day and our day. He does not eschew racism or sexism. Gender really wasn't up for debate or talk at this point. His writing, I believe this book, I mean, it was starting to emerge, but he didn't pay much attention to it. But he was concerned with this, and he was looking to explore and make a contribution as to how this could best be done. And the essay in this book that really stirred up my heart was on the goals and aspirations of humanistic education. And he's essentially outlining here what I conceive of as the mystery school, where people go to learn about themselves, to learn about everything that they are, to learn about all of their humanity, not just the laws and facts and sciences, but about their own organism and about their own experience, their dreams, their aspirations, their talents, what they're not so great at, their sexuality, who they are, because there is a place for every single person. And when we're able to explore that to its fullest extent, that's actually where the breakdown of the boundaries between self and other begin to occur. And we recognize that we actually cannot not participate in a social system, and a social system cannot keep from influencing us, that everything that we do, all that we are, is fundamentally interconnected in ways that we cannot comprehend. And when the goals of a humanistic education are worked towards, when the individuals allowed more freedom of movement and expression, not within a certain bounds, correct? Because you can't do everything that you want. I mean, you can, and that's where I run into my own debate. What is good for anyone? I don't know. I would definitely articulate that it's better to be a seeker of love and truth, or it's better to say to work a simple job that occupies your time if you have troubles with addiction. That perhaps that's not a great way to live and survive and to flourish in this world. I don't think anyone would argue that it is. Worked for Hunter S. Thompson for a while, but even he killed himself when he was in his 70s. Blew his brains out on the kitchen table one morning. Because whenever you start to realize that there is no separation between you and it, and this was actually Freud's original conception, we call it the ego and the id now, but in German, what he was saying was the I and the it, the I and the it. That you actually get to explore the infinite interior that is you. And that the words interior and exterior are just the same, two sides of the same coin. You do the inner work so that you can do the outer work, so that you can do the inner work to do the outer work. There has to be a reorganization of ourselves at this juncture in time, because there are ways that we've been trained and ways that we've been solidified that do not reflect reality. And this is the journey of each individual to discover for themselves, to not eschew their rationality, not to eschew their thinking mind, but to engage it actively and come to the conclusions that are best for them. And it becomes very difficult to articulate that you are at a different stage, or to acknowledge which stages that you are and are not at, because it's not a direct continuum. To use myself as an example, I would say I'm very established, or I'm very developed in my intellect and my reasoning. And to some extent now in my emotional capacity and capacity to be here, but that's taken a great deal of work. And that perhaps on the interpersonal plane, that I'm still getting my feet wet, still getting my footing, if you will. So it's difficult because there's some things that I would proffer, or that I would suggest are better or higher, but at the same time my own work is incomplete. I haven't gotten to the point of full embodied presence, though I can feel it now, which is lovely. That through this process of self-discovery and just keeping with the moment and staying here and recognizing when I come out and recognizing how to get back in, and also just getting lost in the act of living, that I can be more present and more here. And it's also up to us to decide what that's going to look like. And to some extent, perhaps that's what our society reflects. And I would say that that's true. I would say that today it is the net sum of everyone doing their absolute best to ensure that everyone has the absolute best potentialities and possibilities and opportunities available to them. I do think that that's been the goal ultimately. It doesn't mean that we don't have a dominating voice within us. I get dominated by mine all the time when I think that I'm not good enough, when I think I should be doing something else, when I think that I'm not worthy of God's love, of infinite love, of bestowing that love upon myself. And it's not something I can bestow to myself. This is the dichotomy we're talking about. I, Michael, cannot do it. I sure as hell can put a block to it by creating my own false realities. But ultimately, there is nothing that is not God. And so therefore, what is God is the only thing that is real. And these fantasies, or these conceptions that I find myself in, that we all find ourselves in, are not true. And I'm not saying that you have to believe in any sort of system or doctrine. I'm saying to explore it to your fullest extent possible. And that with projects like the Mystery School, I hope to be able to be a facilitator in that, to be an organizer or generator around getting this change going, getting an actual brick and mortar place on the ground. Although, I mean, there's not really much emphasis on brick and mortar now these days either. I think an embodied presence is absolutely vital, but we could reach more people if we utilize this tool at our disposal, which is the internet and broadcast. It could be everywhere at once. And this is something that, you know, if you're interested in this, that I would really appreciate feedback on and appreciate your support with, either in the forms of donations or well wishes or messages of encouragement, of whatever it is, because I know that there's a real desire out there for this, for something like this, to be able to create more space in society for people to know themselves a little bit better, to heal from the traumatic wounds and patterns that have been handed down to them through the generations, through societal trauma, through slavery, and we all carry these things. It's not limited to one population in particular. This is the important thing to understand. It is important to recognize that temporally, there are certain groups that have been owned. There are certain groups who have been denigrated. And even that word denigrated has a bit of the evidence to that in it. It's important to recognize that there are people that are more recently wounded and that have these conditioning, the same, it's as deep of it's as deeply embedded in them as I would say it is in me and as in others, but it is a very particular kind, and one that is aimed at disempowerment of the individual soul. And that's exactly what such institutions would be teaching. They wouldn't be teaching a doctrine. They wouldn't be teaching different sciences. It would be where people would go to learn. And see, I'm very open to discovering what that is. In the words of, I don't know, I think this is God in Noah's Ark, something like that. But if you build it, they will come. I could be wrong about that, but that's the intention that I have with it, is that there is a way to create a space between the grinding wheel of industry and maintaining your position, i.e. making sure that you have a house over your head and food in your bellies and your children's bellies, that there could be some space created so that people can explore themselves and do so with all the fullness of who they are, including whatever obligations and people that are depending on them. I believe that is possible. And the beautiful thing about being human and about being able to pursue yourself to your fullest extent, and to being able to separate from yourself as an object of consciousness, recognizing that what you think you are is an object of consciousness and is not consciousness itself, which you are, in fact. Once you're able to explore that and simply watch what happens and insert more agency into your life and more compassion, greater capacity for empathy, for connection with others, to see yourself and everyone else, to see yourself and everything else. Once you're able to do that, there's no compromise that has to be made, because there is nothing that will satiate your soul except the living of your purpose. And the living of your purpose will be so wonderful and lovely. And will always entail elements of work. We have to sacrifice what we might want to impulsively do for what we might actually like to do, given that we live in a world where there are needs that have to be met. And the action of the individual fully engaged in their purpose could be committing a totally selfish act of totally pursuing their purpose and their pleasure and their love. But when everything is oriented in the right way and our societal structures support that, then what happens is that selfish act will necessarily be selfless. Not just because it'll be more of, you experiencing the universe and more of the universe experiencing you. But the thing that brings you absolute joy will be the joy of so many others, whether it be music, whether it be healing, whether it be singing, dancing, creating new avenues for connection, reprogramming social media, reprogramming the apps that are coming out, reprogramming. And then we'll just all be a bunch of people who are living their soul purpose and helping others to live their soul purpose. And that will be the only thing that we can do with honor and integrity in our soul. That will be the end with which the means blur. So if you want to check out what I've been looking over, I highly recommend, again, Abraham Maslow's book, The Farther Reaches of Human Nature. I think if you're interested in the actualization of your own self, the actualization of your family, of your relationship, of your society, this is a book that you need to read. It's from someone who was very wise, kept his eyes open, both to himself and to the world that he lived in, to what works and what does not work. And you can, as always, you can check me out on austinsoulcoach.com, also on Instagram at Michael Eben Flow. It's been a pleasure to share this space with y'all this evening. Tune in next time. We'll catch you then.